Barb, did you know that they've raised monarchs on the space shuttle? See if they could do it. They didn't feed them real milkweed. They have some kind of milkweed substitute feed they've come up with, but they raised monarchs on the space shuttle. I was reading an article in the Atlantic that my sister found and sent to me.
No, I didn't know that. That's interesting. Did they survive?
They did. They did indeed. They successfully raised them and brought them back down to earth. They survived for a long time in the over the winter. They don't do much of anything in the way of eating through the winter in where they overwinter in Mexico. So they're used to these long spells in between. And then on the way back up, I think there's two generations on the way back up. So the ones that leave Mexico stop and breed, or breed and then stop and lay eggs and stop and lay eggs. So we get that second generation that comes up, but there is a long gap, and I think they picked them for that. I haven't finished reading the article yet, but it's pretty interesting.
Well, I wonder if once they come back, do they follow their same migration or are they confused?
You know, now that's something I'm going to have to look into. I'm pretty sure that that's not covered in this. They covered the whole migration route thing. That's pretty amazing how they do migrate in different places, and some of them go to the same places north every year, all throughout the continent. Pretty darn cool and pretty mysterious. We have definitely seen more butterflies this year, and I keep hearing from more people that, wow, I'm seeing a lot of butterflies. So, and that would be the big butterflies. Most people miss the little ones. They miss the skippers, and some of the even the American lady is small enough. Although she's bright orange, they might miss her. And things like the red admirals are too skittish. They don't float with all that big color showing like the monarchs do, but they are seeing it. Even a guy up the street from me who didn't know what butterfly it was, he said, my wife saw this butterfly, she was really excited about it. I think it started with an M. I thought, boy, it's amazing that there is somebody that hasn't heard the word monarch with all the coverage that there's been recently. Hey, Chris. Did you get my note, Chris, about the that weed? It was not a Vomeria. They look similar, but it's a different weed. So I put it in. In fact, I put it in with a little cohort of new weeds that I said, what is with all these new weeds showing up here? Let's see. But to say to those who just joined in the last minute or so, I forgot to put pictures and had no preamble. A warm-up session notes to put in here. Everything fit back in with other things coming up later. So if there is any question that you got, now's the time to ask it, because I'd have to think about what am I doing? And I'm so scattered right now, so behind on everything. This is the time of year to be behind and helping other people who are behind. My brother-in-law came back from a trip and went, where did all these weeds come from? It's what happens. He said, well, I've worked on the ones that are over 4 feet tall. Can you come help me figure out which of the smaller ones are weeds and which are things I'm supposed to leave in there? Including a barberry that's probably over 3 feet tall. I didn't see it there last year. Those darn plants, darn weeds. Harden off the butterfly bush cuttings. Oh, all right. So Diane, those of you who have your chat open would see this, that Diane is writing about her butterfly bush cuttings that she took some cuttings weeks ago, and they are now beginning to grow their own new roots, and she wonders if she has to harden them off. If you can expose them to decreasing days by keeping them in a window rather than underneath grow lights, and let them start getting cool, which is what's happening right now. Third week of August, heat breaks at night, at least for our part of the continent. And it's so nice to feel the cool. The plants feel it too, and the cooler weather and the shorter days are what cause them to chemically change their cells and start hardening off. And yeah, if they're growing new leaves on top, usually you can assume that the cutting is rooted. Sometimes they manage to grow a few leaves without any substantial root, but generally you can assume that they're rooted. And would you plant them? Would I plant them out? They're such teeny tiny little things. If I planted out cuttings that I started during the summer, I planted them out in the fall, I probably would put some kind of protection over them. Maybe a milk jug, one of the opaque isn't quite the word, the milky, uh, partially cloudy milk jugs. Cut the bottom off, put it on, and take the top off of it. I might protect them once it gets a little bit cooler in a couple of weeks, and certainly want to protect them from being stepped on. I stepped on a bunch of stuff I planted today, earlier this week. But yeah, I think, and if I protected something that I put out, Diane's wondering about how long to protect them. If I protect something that I put out in the fall, I usually leave the protection on over the winter. So if there's a milk jug on them, I'm going to leave the milk jug on with the cap off, and maybe put something around it so it stays down and doesn't get blown away. But I'm going to keep the cover on as long as I can possibly keep the cover on. But is that enough? I don't know. From the same place that you took your cuttings, your butterfly bush cuttings, I so often in the fall just cut branches from the butterfly bush, just branches this long, strip off all the flower parts on the top and the leaves on the bottom, and just jam them into the ground with 2 or 3 nodes buried, and just leave them over the winter. And usually half of them have rooted the next spring, so I've got my new butterfly bushes. I have broken the law several times, taking butterfly bush cuttings from clients' gardens where I go, oh, that's a nice butterfly bush. I think I'll take a piece of that one and bring it here. It's technically, especially since I was working in the business, technically, it's a patented plant with a trademarked name. The person who developed it, the company that developed it and got the patent, should be getting money for each plant that's produced from it on a professional basis. So, but they do work real readily. They do root real readily, and I like to have them. I rooted cuttings. In fact, there's a picture of one of the bushes that's in here. My son's dwarf Nanho blue. Yeah, Nanho blue. No, not Nanho blue.
Nano blue.
Is Cardinal, or is it Lo and Behold?
Oh, it's lo and behold.
Yeah, Lo and
So
Behold,
blue and
buttercup.
purple they were.
Yeah, and it's only, what are those? They're under the windowsill, so they're probably,
They don't even reach 3 feet.
yeah, so they're not even 3 feet tall. But one of them, and we don't get, I can't remember when we last pulled a seedling of one of them, but there was a seedling early on, either that came up from them or maybe from a neighbor's butterfly bush. But it was, even though I cut it back in the spring to the ground, it was 5 feet tall and it bloomed with long trusses of flowers on it, and the butterflies just flocked to that one. They ignored the other butterfly bushes, they ignored the other plants in the garden, straight to that butterfly bush. So that particular one I brought to a toll gate class that we did, and we all cut it up and people took pieces of it home. And then I just brought pieces of it back and jammed them in the ground, and 2 of them are growing out in our garden now and still doing the same butterfly magnet stuff.
We've gotten rid of butterfly bush that even though they had beautiful blooms, beautiful colors, they didn't bring in any pollinators. And another one that's just nothing super spectacular, but nice, and pollinators all over it.
Yeah, yeah. We thought at first that they weren't coming to that cascade. Seems like it had the name Cascade. Very big trusses on it. It almost didn't look like a
Yes.
butterfly bush. And
They're
the
all
neighbors,
hydrangea size.
yeah, and the neighbors were all oohing and eyeing over it. And we thought the first year that the butterflies weren't coming because probably, since we bought it at a nursery, it had been treated with one of the systemic insecticides, and the butterflies could smell it and taste it, and we're staying away from it. We thought, well, the next year it'll be all right, but it wasn't all right. The next year they were avoiding it, so it grows at the neighbor's house now because the neighbor admired it so much. I said, well, I'll dig it up and move it over to your house, so it's over there, and we have all the butterflies over here.
It is 7 o'clock.
All right.
Good evening and welcome to Free4All Friday. This is our 86th version
Wow.
of it, and we're coming to you from gardenatozz.org. I'm
We're
Stephen Nicola.
yeah, we welcome all gardeners to celebrate growing and cultivate problem solving. And Stephen with his I think there's probably something there with fishing in Detroit, but it's pretty.
Parker Meadows, they have his number on the back. He was noted as a bass fisherman
Oh,
in Florida. And I don't know whether he participated in a tournament or something, or everybody got the jersey. I didn't get the whole story from Sandy, but I like it.
yeah, I like the shirt. It's a nice color.
Yep.
You know about our website. I didn't see anybody on the list here who wouldn't already know about our website. I pulled up one of the articles today that we could use and tell you about. And I will tell you that if you go to our homepage, it says Meet Us in the Field. And I'll tell you later about a couple of opportunities coming up to come and do stuff with us, pruning and designing. And the way to figure out when that is click Meet Us in the Field, and you can go. That takes you right to our calendar that tells us when we're doing those kinds of things. Because it's how people learn, how gardeners learn anyway. It's with their hands. We don't learn by reading it. We don't learn by talking about it. We might absorb it when somebody says it, or we see it in a book or read it off of a page, but we don't learn it till we go out and make the mistake. We go out there and we do something and it doesn't work, and we think, oh, that's right. We were told it. So it's doing and sharing that information that seems to me to be the best thing for gardeners, and that's what Free4All Fridays and these Garden by Janet and Steve's that we do, meeting us in the field. That's what we're doing those for, and we're very thankful to those who subscribe to our webinars, because it is the subscriptions to the webinars that help us pay for the webinar costs and allows us to have the time to do Free4All Fridays for you, and book club too. Free4All Fridays, tell people about it. They don't have to be on our subscription list. They don't have to get a formal invitation from us. They can just go to our website, go to Fridays, and click on the link and join us, which is where a couple of our questions this week came from. When we are on these question breaks today, most of the pictures that we chose to put in are pictures of kids in summer, because it's almost time for them to go back to school, and they are going to cram as much as they can into this last week, don't you think? And so we have some joyous pictures of doing things in the summertime. There were no questions to start off, but if there are questions now, I don't think I see anything in chat.
Barb is asking, would trimming back carpet roses now that they have gotten leggy and not blooming be helpful, or is it too late in the season?
Oh no, they've got lots of growing time still left. The problem is that they're probably not going to produce flowers on any of the new growth that comes out, not this year. And if it was me growing those carpet roses, by next spring I'd be cutting back to the places where they started to grow. So I'm not sure that it's going to advance them that much, but it certainly looks better. I think anything we can cut back and let it start coming back again is great. Okay, and Stephen is with us for a while tonight, but there's another hockey gardening conflict here, and Stephen and I have determined that we retired a while ago, and Stephen has waited his whole life to have someone who will talk hockey with him to the depth and extent that his grandson talks hockey. So he will be leaving us part way, but he'll keep track of the chat until then.
Yep. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Guys.
Okay. No other questions, and I'm going to go with my first topic, which is where I am right now. It all seems to have gone wild all at once. Where do you start? I call it garden triage, the August version of garden triage. I'm way behind. I put off quite a few things that had to do with weeds. I said, I can get to those later. And of course, it's toward the end of summer, so there are a lot of things that are brown that could be cut down and made to look better. There's a lot of deadheading to do, and it's like, where do I start? I thought I would ask you, where do you start? I have, for instance, I call this a low priority but easy thing to get back under control. This is the side passage from our patio in the front around to the back where the bird feeders are. And none of this green that's here should be here. There's a pokeweed. There's a pokeweed right here. There's a lot of these euphorbias. I'll show you those in a minute. And there's a great excess of money plant, of linaria or honesty seedlings coming up that'll bloom next year, but they will bloom next year right in the path, which is not where I want them. that's a fairly easy thing to take care of. And I think I should probably go in there and just clean that up because it'll make me feel good right away. But I also have the garden we put in for the neighbor, and it's right out at the road, and people see it. So I go out and get the mail, and I stand and look at the garden, and I ask myself, can anybody else tell what a mess this is? And that's kind of my test. And I look at it and I go, I don't think that they can tell that those are things that don't belong there. So I'm going to focus on the things that I know I can tick off my list and say, I'll get this one done, and then move on from there. Everybody does it differently. This is one of the weeds that I think I told you about a couple of years ago. It showed up, well, I saw it here in this garden, and it showed up in Sonia's garden and places in Ontario about the same time. It's called radium weed, or cancer weed, or milkweed. In part, those names come from the supposed use for some kind of cancer treatment. I don't know what state that's in, but it is a euphorbia. It is a prolific seeder. It's an annual. And right now, these are things that appeared this year. They're not running roots that have come up from a colony, and that makes them easier to take care of. They also have not yet ripened the seed. There's no ripe brown tan parts here where the flowers form on the euphorbia. So I've got a little bit of time. If I can keep it from creating a new batch of seed, then that's great. It is one of those milky stemmed plants, milky sap plants that if you get it on your fingers, you don't want to be pushing your glasses up on your nose, and because that sap can burn the skin.
Yeah, be careful with that plant.
Yep.
Teresa said she started by opening her paths back up.
And that makes such a difference to open the paths, to clear, even if you don't do the gardens that are on either side of the path, to get the path clear. You're right, it's just perfect because it brings people back into the garden, it brings the eye back into the garden, it brings some relief space. So yeah, cutting back the paths. Good point, Teresa, good point. This is, you can't even see the pond. Well, you can. This is the pond right in here. But the pond is bigger than that. This creeping forget-me-not has actually crept out and is growing on the water. So are a couple of these lobelia siphiliticas, the blue lobelia that have moved themselves in. And you know what, Steve? The Collinsonia, the richweed, has only barely bloomed this year. Last year it bloomed so much better, and the hummingbirds loved it. Yeah. But
I think it might be the dryness.
Yeah, I think it's drier this year. It is right at the edge of the pond, but it is an artificial pond, and the liner stops about here. So we thought that we could keep it somewhat moist, which is what richweed wants. We shouldn't have it in our garden, but we rescued it from a place in the woods where I took the cutting from one of the plants that was there, where a bunch of trees had fallen down and changed everything. It was going away. So anyway, this one is also a place where I could peel that back from the pond and be able to see the pond again. Or you could just say, never mind, I'll let the weeds go for right now and enjoy the stuff that I grew. Now, this is not stuff that we grew because we have very little in the way of edible stuff in our gardens right now. But this is Sonia's haul yesterday. And,
wow.
Yeah. It is wonderful to be able to have things to just, of course, with that number of peas, they would never have made it into the house when we were growing peas.
Oh yeah,
here.
No, munch, gone.
They got eaten, and this is a snack of cherry tomatoes for me.
Yeah, if they were tasty, they were gone too.
Yeah. But then, what's it matter? It's our stuff. We grew it, and
we don't know how many she ate anyway.
No, we don't. She might have eaten an equal number of those before she even brought them into the house.
Bruce said she had a hummingbird on the big evening primrose plant.
Oh, really? Yeah, it makes sense. That makes sense. It's got a little nectary hanging off the back of it too. Those anotheras are cool. Is that the biennial evening primrose, the tall one, Ruth? Because I used to let that grow in our garden just so that we could bring them in.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah, we used to bring them in to let them open in the house and watch have the kids be able to see them pop open. Easy ones to do.
There's no other questions right now.
Okay, this is the blue lobelia, Lobelia syphilitica. It's native and
A
throughout,
lot of bees come to it. And
yeah,
so does a hummingbird.
yeah. And it's called Lobelia syphilitica because the indigenous people here, when syphilis was introduced to this population from the European migrants, they were using it trying to cure syphilis. It didn't, but it was the plant that they were using. So the Jesuits and other people who were recording plants as they traveled through the country and giving them names, named it for the use that they assumed it was good for, which it wasn't. It's been crossed. They crossed the blue lobelia with the red lobelia, the cardinal flower, where these petals are more separated and it does look like a little red bird. They've crossed them with each other and then back crossed the offspring with the tender cardinal flower that has it's native further south in the United States, and gotten some incredible lobelias called Lobelia gerardii and Lobelia cross speciosa, that the flowers are electric red violets and blue violets and good long-lived plants.
Into purple even. Diane asked, does your great bougainvillea spread around? We just planted our first ones last year. They are just more filled out this year, and I just love them. Ours have spread.
We just noticed this year that along the neighbors have a strip along the wall of their house that faces our garage, and it's not a maintained strip. It has some daylilies and I think there's a peony in there, but it was planted long ago and just let go. And we just noticed this year that the blue lobelia has shown up there. So they do spread around, but they don't spread. They don't make a bigger clump. They just kind of come up here and there, and I like that personally. They're more amenable to drier conditions, the blue lobelia, than the red lobelia is. So we keep trying to grow the red lobelia, but that needs constant water.
Yeah, we haven't had much luck with it unless it was right almost in the water, like on our old garden in Alberta, on the pond edge.
One of the things that I have been doing in various areas is deadheading. I make that a priority because you do lose a few flowers to take the older flowers off. But this time of year, especially at the end of the season, there are a lot of insects looking for pollen. There's a lot of us looking for color, and we get a little bit more color in that last half of the season. So the butterfly bush, this is the one with the long tresses that we were talking about before, that grew from cuttings we inked out of our son's yard, and that needs to come off. It won't stop the butterfly bush from blooming because the butterfly bushes have a tendency to keep forming new flowers even when they are creating ripening seed. But it does cut down the number of new flowers coming, and I'd like to keep them coming since it's one of our big butterfly draws this time of year. So that part that's bloomed out, along with its subtending, these two little shoots at the bottom, need to be cut off, and you can probably see that there's new shoots starting from right there. So you can be very particular and you can cut off this and just its two little shoots, or you can move down a node and cut that one off. Doesn't matter, it's still going to grow more. And you do lose a few flowers. I've had people say, oh, there were still flowers on it. It's better to lose those few flowers in order to get more flowers and more stuff coming. So if you get a chance, do some deadheading. It feels good, it's easy to do, and it provides more for the insects that are out there. Now, I'm not...
The few flowers only provide so much that,
Right. That wasn't like you took a lot away, but my neighbor, for instance, didn't want to deadhead her salvia because there was some color on it. I said, but that color is being overwhelmed by the amount of brown there is visually, and even if it seems you leave less color, it'll be more impactful and more color will follow it afterwards. There's some things that I'm not going to deadhead our cup plant. It's 10 feet up there, and I'm not going to climb up and do that. And it is a plant that the goldfinches love to come and pick the seeds out of,
Yep.
or they turn brown. So, and this time of year, watching them sit on the tops of these tall stems and wave back and forth in the wind, talking to each other. Tweety, tweety, tweety. They have a call that is their what do they call that? Recognition call, status call. They're just telling each other, "Are you still there? Are you still there?" And there's a lot of that going on because the young ones are out right now, and the young ones find it comforting, I guess, to hear that the parents are still there. Even pokeweed is pretty flowers this time of year. For me, though, whenever I see the pokeweed, I go, okay, get out the fork. That's big enough. If it's blooming, then I'm going to have to use the fork to loosen to pull the root out.
Nancy said when she was at Wiegand's, they were actually selling the red cardinal flower in the water. Yeah, I've seen that at some nurseries that have water garden things.
Sure.
And at University of Wisconsin Arboretum, they were right in the edge of the pond and doing quite well, thank you.
I have heard from some people that they won't overwinter in the pond. That you need to pull them back or bury the pot in the ground or do something with it. I haven't myself seen that happen, but there are some that are like that. The Siberian iris or the Japanese iris. One of the irises that like water doesn't like to overwinter in the water. Pokeweed. It's such fun watching kids do this kind of stuff. And
they do have fun.
Okay, it is time to prune. Those things that we want to keep smaller than their potential or want to keep them fancifully shaped. This is one of the prime times to prune. The last of August until the middle of September is prime time. The reason being, before I show you pictures, the reason being that the plants are finishing their growth for the year. They're beginning to harden off their buds. And they've grown as far as they're going to grow this year and gotten some return from that growth. That new growth that they made has fed the roots, has created starches, has helped the plant bulk up. But if you want to keep that plant smaller than it would be, then taking away some of its potential growing power is a good thing to do. So if I take plants back to a smaller size now and deny them the ability to take that part that I took off and use it all through the fall, there's a little bit less energy to push out a little bit more next year, and it's a bit more under control. I decided to put this topic in when Greg sent these pictures. Greg is a retired professional gardener too, and he said, do you think that I can take 4 or 5 feet off the top of these arborvitaes? I said, sure you can. It's quite doable. But Greg, you're not getting suckered into doing work again. He said, that's at my daughter's house. I said, okay, daughter's house is okay, but you gotta not be out there on a ladder when you've retired. So arborvitae, like spruce and pine and junipers, juniper, arborvitae, pine, spruce, that's the PJ Fax with the pine in the front. They can't grow from bare wood. They need to have green needles and buds ready set for the next year in order to keep a branch growing. So it is a little different with arborvitae, and we've written about this. This is the article called Arborvitae Got Too Tall. You'd find it in our search if you put in prune arborvitae. This will be one of the articles that comes up, where I'm going to show you a cross section here. I'm going to cut right out through, and this is the cross section of this plant. So if I want to cut it down this far, and I'd like to keep the narrow shape, I'm going to have to shorten branches down here to bring the width in too. And it is how much green there is on the bottom of the plant that is the real determinant of how far you can cut back the top and still keep the shape. Because if I can only cut this back, I can't cut this back any further than this, then I'm going to have some bare spots in it up here if I cut it that far. So I'll show you some real plants here. So I can take that branch right out and I can let the little things that are on the inside grow, and I'll show you those little things on the inside of these plants. So this arborvitae, growing in a client's flower garden, and we need to keep it small. I took the top off and reshaped it this way. This is the next spring, as it's, this was right after I pruned it. So I've taken the top off and I've made the sides narrower to keep the form of the plant. And then here it is now a year later, this is a year later, growing back and filling in. Every place that I left where there was green and buds, it's filling out and filling in. But when I first cut it back, you could see through to some brown because the new buds, the green buds, were coming from right down at the branch. And by cutting it this way, pruning it this way, you let light into that area and those buds can grow. The next set of pictures here is a different plant. Go back up. This plant I brought down to this size from twice that height. And I cut it down. You might be able to see the cut stubs in here. I cut some branches all the way down to where, see the little bits of green down here? I hope you can see my pointer waving around down there. I cut back that branch so that these buds would fill in on the inside in some of these bare spots. So I have lots of those cuts back to buds that in some cases are very tiny, but they're green and they're buds. These are real evident. There's buds there, but there are buds on each of these too. You might be able to see a little bit of green right here. Let's see if and they're little tiny buds. As long as those buds are there, and I give it a chance, give it light to grow, those will grow. If the plant continues to grow larger and shade in that area, those buds will die and not be used. So the next year, the shrub was coming up this size, and my client said, it's still too big, I don't want it that big. So I cut it again. Even the year after I cut it the first time, I cut it down to this small from here, and ended up with a plant about like so. This week I've been working with yews, yews, Y-E-W, not yews guys, but yews, the taxus group. They are more amenable. They will grow from bare wood, so I can be a little less careful with them. I see that Judith has raised her hand, and it might be about cutting back arborvitae. So before I move forward to this one, go ahead, Judith.
Yeah, no, it's not. It can wait.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, then we'll hit it in a question session. So I'm working on yews. Those plants that we keep fancifully shaped are topiary. They don't have to look like a teddy bear or any of the other things that you can turn plants into by shaping them. If we are shaping them into cubes, dumplings, pyramids like this, cones like this, that's a topiary. So topiary, this is topiary time at the end of fall. This is a pyramidal yew. If I let it just grow, it would be 30 feet tall, and basically narrower at the top than at the bottom, but with a lot looser look than what you see right here. And I also have topiaries, and this is at my son's yard, that I've cut into. This is a bumblebee. These are antennae. There's one, we can't see that side. This is the wing, the body. There's a stinger back here. And I'm just cutting those now too. Those started as probably 30-year-old yews that were pretty decrepit. It took me years to get them thick enough to really do this, and they're looking pretty good now. You can maybe tell more what it is when I put in a coreopsis to be the eye on each side. So the pyramidal yews, though, they look like this now. They were controlled and nice looking till about 3 weeks ago. And at that point, the tip bud, the one that was higher than the rest of the buds at the end of each branch, got control and took off. So I'm going to cut those off, and I want to let this shrub go until next year at this time. I do not want to have to prune it in the spring. I don't want to have to prune it partway through. I prune them just once a year. So I'm going to first shear it down to the same size that it was before. So all that you see here is I've taken, and I used electric head shears in this case, but I can also use my manual shears, or do it by hand if I want to. But I sheared the shrub first, and I sheared it all the way down to where I'd sheared it before, all the way down to where if I went further, the shears were going to start binding up on wood that was too thick. If I don't cut it, and I'll show you this in more detail later, if I don't cut it back as far as I cut it back before, and I mean all the way back, it'll be a ½ inch bigger. and the next year it'll be an inch bigger, and the next year, and that's how these things creep on you. So I cut it all the way back. And what I did is I took off, so I sheared, do you see the bottom of this branch that came off here? See, it's become woody. That's where the growth started at the beginning of the year. It started from there. This grew, and this one was originally the same size as this one, but because it was higher and further out on the plant, it's what took off a few weeks ago. The chemicals in it said, okay, I'm in charge. But I'm cutting back not to here, but to there, and cutting to get that base of what was there last year off. And that's good. When that's gone now, I'm leaving a place where just the green, just the part that was right below here, its side branches are going to grow and start from that point. If I leave these, now see, these are the thicker stuff, and I cut back to where I've cut before, which is right about here. If I do that, this cluster of a lot of little woody branches, little new branches, are going to all begin growing right from there, and there's going to be 6 or 7 or 8 branches growing and competing right together. Those will shade out everything below them, and they'll become less and less growth further down in. So I am going to, after I shear it, right back to where it was the year before, that's where I sheared it, I'm going to pat the outside of the plant, and that's what I call it, clip and pat. I pat the outside of the plant, and I can feel these very thick ones, and I reach back in and cut them further back. So this is a piece that I took out in order to let it have fewer and more healthy growth out from where I cut, and also more growth coming from inside of the plant, so it's not such an empty shell over time. But if I don't do this pat portion after I cut it, if I don't take those off, each one of these branches that I leave here, here, they're going to produce 2 and 3 branches, and it's going to get thicker and thicker and thicker right at the outside edge of the plant. All of those are going to grow. I want these to grow. See the buds down here? So this is what's at the outside of my plant. When I cut to right here, I'm leaving this one to grow and this one to grow, not so many to grow. I hope that makes sense to you, and I hope that you will go out and try this yourself. Go out and pat a plant afterwards and see, oh, I see what's there. I have to go all the way back through. I forgot to put this picture back in again. Oh, okay, this is the finished picture. I put them in the reverse order. This is the finished picture. I put the yard waste bag behind so that you could see. Can you see through here? Can you see the brown right there? I couldn't this year see through the plant. I can't see the brick through there. Even when I cut it back, I can't see the brick through there. But I can see the brown paper bag because I've taken a clip out of there. Now, nobody's going to see that unless you point it out to them. And there are a bunch of holes in there. But those holes are letting light into the middle of the plant. Okay, I know there are questions. There are always questions about this pruning.
Well, first of all, will blue lobelia bloom again if I cut off all the blooms now end of August?
Yes.
Some plants will come again, your butterfly bush example, but some will not. If it's too late for the lobelia to bloom again, I'll just leave it the little color that's left.
Yeah, that's a good answer to it, but it will bloom again if you cut it back. There are some plants that won't bloom again. Peonies won't bloom again. They need a cold period to set new flower buds. So you can cut the peonies all you want, and they're not going to come back again. But a lot of the summer blooming plants, the campanulas, the daisies, and whatever, if you cut them back before they start setting seed, you'll get some more flowers. Maybe not a lot, but you get some color. Veronicas, what else have we? I was cutting the gaillardias, just keep on going. Daisies, coreopsis. Excuse me. What else did I cut back? Yarrows. Yeah, there are a lot of things that will come back. Okay, what else?
Yeah. Quickly, Teresa says my boxwoods are doing the same thing, the growth spurt. And then thank you for this. I have wondered and will pat my boxwoods.
Yep. Just find those thicker ones. Cut
and them. Judith has her hand up.
Okay, Judith, this is what we're
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Hi, so 2 questions. The primary one is that I have 3 containers of basil. One of them is larger than the others, but the others are not small. They're all kind of packed with basil, and in fact, the larger one has rosemary and a couple other things in it too. Um, they're the two that are not doing well were in a different place from the one that's still coming along. But I moved one of them to about 5 feet from the one that's doing well. The other two are kind of pinched looking. The leaves are curling in. They look a little chlorotic in spite of having gotten a nice little fertilizer drink. And I'm wondering what is going on. They've all had their blooms pinched back, but maybe not completely. And I'm just not sure why one of them is doing so much better than the other two.
Did the ones that are not doing so well, did they look like they were growing apace with the good one early on in the year?
Yes. They
Hmm.
were all in a sunny place in the backyard, and then I moved 2 of them into the front yard into a place that I thought was sunny,
Ah,
but I don't monitor it all the time.
right, right.
And then when they started pinching in, I moved the one of them back to the backyard with the full sun.
Yeah. I can only assume that there's something that was different about that other spot that they didn't like. Basil does like the sun. They don't like cool weather. They don't like drafts. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I can tell what that difference would be. But I would say that next year, grow your basil in that spot where they did well.
Yeah, I can.
It could even be what plants they're growing with if they're not growing with the same combinations, because plants do create an environment of their own, and some plants get along well with other plants. So it could be that they don't like each other. It's a
Hmm,
bad way to put it,
okay.
but they are each creating things that that favor their growth, and some of those things that favor their growth discourage other plants from growing.
Well, so interestingly, the two that are doing worse are only two different varieties of basil, purple basil and Genovese basil.
Uh,
And then the one that is doing better is companioned with rosemary and some nasturtium. They were originally with other things that were planted from seed, but they pretty much crowded all of those other things out.
these are the things that I don't want to live 1,000 years. I think that would get tiring. But I think it would take 1,000 years to actually grow all the combinations and figure out these things. People have asked about companion planting books because there are sayings like roses love onions, and that if you plant onions near roses, they help each other out, and that the onions discourage some pests that the roses get. If I plant marigolds with some plants, the orange flowers on the marigolds attract aphids to land lay their eggs on the marigolds rather than on the plants next door. There are some things that people say like that, and they get written down and passed down, but very rarely get tested, because how can you know all these different combinations? Yeah, you may be telling us about it in no time at all. You may say, I think I figured it out, but I can't tell you any more than I'm going to grow my basil where it did well last year. We used to grow it along the edge of the driveway. I think it liked the heat. Got watered well there, but I think it liked the heat. Okay.
Nancy has a hand up.
Okay, Nancy?
So I did major rejuvenation cuts for a bunch of yews earlier in the year. And now I can see where new growth is coming in real low. But then I also have a lot of completely bare branches that nothing has grown.
Cut those guys
Should
back.
I
Cut those back.
cut them back now, or should I wait till the spring to see if something else is going to come out of them?
Cut them back, because if what you're generally going to get after the plant pushes out new growth is you might get some growth from the tops of branches, and if you rejuvenate it and you want it growing from down below and you've got new growth coming from down below, cut down to favor that growth. It sometimes makes them look very awkward for a while. I have I have shown pictures of those pyramidal yews, which took me almost 10 years to get into the state that they're in right now from the decrepit state that they were in. But they looked ridiculous for a while. I think my daughter-in-law was going to divorce me over them at one point, but she was too busy with the kids to to get into it. But it can, when you're rejuvenating something, it can take a while to get all of the plant's branches on the same schedule. But if they're coming back well from a branch down here, then I'm going to cut these branches back to down there or a little lower and let them come back more uniformly, more quickly.
Some of them are just, there's nothing all the way to the ground.
Yeah.
And these are really old yews.
Yeah, and there are some yews, and I wish, it's another one of the 1,000-year things. Some varieties of yew, and I can't quite figure it, there are some yews that don't seem to break well. Maybe it's a genetic thing. The ones that I've worked with for the most part are densiformis and the wart eyes, and those do fine. I have a feeling that brownie eye, the variety brownie eye, doesn't break as well from old wood, but all you can do is try and cut it to where you want it to come from, knowing that at least one branch came, and watch what they do. And if you have to take them out, I tell people all we've lost then is we've already cut it all the way down. Now we just got to dig it out and get a new one.
Gretchen is asking, so is it time to prune a Japanese maple?
Yes, if you're trying to keep it smaller than it wants to be, or you're pruning it to direct the growth because you want a better form. Quite often Japanese maples are just kind of bushy, congested things when we buy them. There was a time when growers would prune for shape on the Japanese maples, and to me that made it worth the extra money that you paid for them. But anymore now they're just shearing them and making them bushy, so you might be opening them up now in order to have a better branching and have that nice sculptural effect that you're envisioning for the mature plant. Steve,
Bernie is commenting.
if you gotta get going, Steve, you leave any time.
A couple minutes. Her Japanese maple is showing signs of being munched on. Just skeleton leaves are left. Japanese beetles? She hasn't seen anything.
It's possible it's Japanese beetles. What else would skeletonize a Japanese maple? If it's skeletonizing it, it's almost certainly some kind of beetle, but whether it's Japanese beetle, I'm not sure. And I haven't seen, can't tell you, can't guess. I would have to look and see. I'd have to check some of the books and see if there's something that I'm not even thinking of, but it probably is not a caterpillar. It's probably a beetle, and I don't know the specific beetles for a Japanese maple. If it's not doing a lot of damage, though, this is well past the time when that leaf...
Yeah, they're already shutting down. Randall is wondering how the deadhead phlox. It looks like some buds might open on the already...
Yeah. Phlox is a toughie. You have to take the whole cluster off, take it down back to side branches and let it form a new pom-pom. Because otherwise you're trying to take out individual... You have a cluster where the phlox flower cluster branched and then branched again from there, and it will drive you mad to try to clear out but to cut the whole cluster off and let new ones start coming from below is your better bet.
Yep. I'm going to cut out the last one you answered in chat was from Nancy Randall at 7:32.
Okay, that sounds
okay. See you all later. Have a good night. Ta-ta for now.
All right, well, we'll stay on this one and take a look at what Judith is asking about her endless summer and lacecap hydrangeas. Are in various stages from blue pink to pale and brown. Time to deadhead the ones that are past their prime. Some people say don't deadhead the lacecaps and the mophead hydrangeas because the flower cluster itself provides a little protection in the winter. I haven't seen that that's really the case, but yes, once they're starting, some of them are starting to get brown. Now would be the time to deadhead for looks. It's not going to do much for the growth that comes later on the plant, but looks-wise, it's better. If you let them go brown, then they hold paint, and that's when you can paint them in the fall. So Some people let them stay on there or let them go all the way to brown, and then when they're dry, you can spray paint them. We had one client that used to spray paint them for each season. She'd spray paint them for Halloween orange, and then she'd change it to silver and blue, I think, for for Thanksgiving, and then anyway, people are a little on the goofy side with hydrangeas, and with good reason. There's so many things you can do with it. Oh, Ruth, you're right. Bagworms, or tent cat, fall webworm might get onto it, but you would see, and bagworms, you would see things hanging off of it. So maybe pictures, Bernie, pictures of what your leaves and the branches look like, because maybe there's some evidence there that I might recognize that you aren't seeing.
I will do so. I'll send it to you.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks.
Look at this kid right there. Is that concentration or what? Okay, whenever something is gone, and this is because Keith sent me a picture and a question that was about pruning, but it ended up talking about design. If I lose something, then there's room to put something new in. And for most gardeners, I notice that takes about 20 minutes. Oh, darn, I'm going to lose that. Wow, maybe now I can get, and that's redesign time. The question started about pruning. Keith sent this picture. He said, I have 2 of these holly bushes, and they're kind of scraggly. And now I'm seeing them where I really wasn't seeing them before, because I had to take down a big tree. Is it time for me to prune them? And he sent me both this, which told me they're not a holly, and this. I said, well, they're not a holly, and that's a mistake that people have made before. You may be able to see berries in this section right here, fruit. That's this is a crabapple. This is probably a Sargent crabapple. It may be a Tina crabapple, but I think it's more likely a Sargent. These little bitty crabapples turn bright red and are persistent. Persistent crabapples hold their fruit through the winter. So in the winter, they're covered with red berries, and people often call them hollies. Birds like to eat them. I like crabapples for that. Well, I looked at that and I said, first, it's a crabapple, and yes, you can go ahead and prune it now. And I talked to him about what I showed you last week in pruning crabapple and cherry. But he sent a picture of the whole bed, and I said, well, given the whole bed and the 2 crabapples that you got, and the way that this was set up where the tree is, I said, I think I would put something there. Right now, these 2 bookends are framing the neighbor's house. If this is how you see the bed, your attention is being drawn, just like 2 bookends draw your attention, is being drawn into the middle, and you're looking at the neighbor's house. I said, I would plant something to take the place of the tree. And you don't have to plant right where the tree is. You can plant in front of the tree trunk. And if you started with something that was small, you'll be able to fit it between those flare roots that are off in the ground there. I suggested a 7 sun shrub. They're getting ready to bloom right now, usually late August, early September. White flowers are fragrant. The monarch butterflies are all over them when they bloom. Then the flowers turn into pink seed pods for October. No real fall color, but the bark is white and shaggy and can look quite pretty in the wintertime. I said, what about something like that? This would be, if these Sargent crabapples are, as they usually are, about 8 feet tall. I'd say 6 feet for the bulk of them, and maybe 8 feet up to here. This is a half-grown or 3/4 grown 7 sun shrub. It will be bigger than this. But if you put something in the middle, then you have something worth looking at, and I don't have to look at straight through to the neighbor's house anymore. Now, I'd also like to talk about the rocks and the fact that they are circling the whole bed and calling attention into the middle, but I'm not going to bother Keith. I have talked to this gardener a long time, over a lot of years, and I think one step at a time, worry about getting those rocks into something more conducive to calling out the design. And speaking of design, we started this a while ago, and we invited people to come with us. We didn't get any takers for that, but I'm asking you now about these 2 plants. At least I hope that's what I'm asking about now. These are at Nancy and David's house. They're pyramidal or columnar junipers, and they look nice right now, but they are ultimately going to be very big for this space. at some point you need to say, how big do I want them to be? Do I want them to be as tall as the window, as tall as the blind part of the window? But at the time when they get to the size, the height that you want them to be, or the width you want them to be, or both, that's when you start pruning. And so these need to be pruned, and because they are, like arborvitae, not going to sprout from bare wood, it takes a little bit of a special touch, and we're inviting you to come and help us do that if you want. This bed was also, when I called out these junipers to Nancy and David, we were working on this design option, which is to put, as it turns out, a Tina crabapple into their bed, and David is mocking up where the Tina would be and what its spread would be in the lawn right there. And because Tina and David, this is their backyard, they like variety and a lot of different kinds of plants. Doing something like Keith did with the same plant on either side is a frame, but it limits your variety that you're able to put in. So any symmetrical planting where I put something in the center and the same thing on either side of it, I can put in fewer types of plants overall. It's not a wrong design, it's just for someone who likes more variety, not the way to go. So when we say the crabapple's going to go here, we're not going to put the same thing on either side of it in the new bed. We're going to arrange plants and say, let's see, what should we put here, and we'll balance it, we'll frame it, but we won't frame it with the same thing on either side. And we moved around a lot of plants, tried them this way, tried them that way, and had invited you to come there and do that with us so that you could see how this works out. We kind of decided on here, and looked at it from different angles, said, okay, I think that'll work well, all the way from the door of the house, and eventually put things down here, saying that these were our winter interest plants: evergreen, 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 evergreen. We were going to ring the crabapple with those, but not evenly, heavier on the side toward the driveway and lighter over here. And then in this spot, fill this spot closer to the tree with things that are deciduous and have something blue-purple to them. So we were framing the plant twice, but framing it asymmetrically rather than symmetrically, same thing on either side. So we're going to prune to restrict those junipers. That's next Thursday, the 27th. This is in Troy. And we also have a workshop coming up in September in Akron, Ohio, where we'll be pruning lilacs and working on design ideas. And we're inviting you to either of those. You just go to our, either just go right to our calendar page, which is About Us Calendar, aftergardeningaz.org, or on the home page, there's a link that says Meet Us in the Field. If you click there, it takes you to the calendar. All of these kinds of dates are listed, and all you need to do is call us to reserve a spot, call or email, and include your phone number so that we've got a number to call back and tell you if the weather changes our plans. But do that. You'll see on that calendar page that it says that we charge if you're not one of our webinar subscribers. But so far we haven't had to do that. So far we're just not charging anybody. We're just saying, come, get your hands on, learn the way gardeners learn the best. And that's on the home page, Meet Us in the Field, or go right to the calendar from the link, gardeningaz.org, About Us Calendar. And that'll take you to all the things that are set up for the rest of the year. Okay, other questions? Are crab apples edible? Diana's wondering. Yes, crab apples are edible. They're not a cross between a crab apple and an apple. Apples and crab apples are the same species. We have just selected and selected and selected and selected from the wild crab apples to get bigger fruit and different kinds of fruit and then cross them with each other. But they are the same species. And crab apples are edible. They're just, because they're smaller, some are not nearly as tiny as a sergeant, but because they're smaller, the coring and pitting can take a lot more time with those. Bernie wants to know if she can prune a larger, older juniper branch and expect the smaller, lower, weaker branch. Large, older juniper branch. Yes, the small, when you cut back a juniper branch, and after we do our workshop next Thursday, we'll certainly have pictures where I can show you or you can go to, if you're a webinar subscriber, you can go to our webinars about pruning. We've shown these pictures before, but wherever there's green on the juniper branch, I can cut back to there, and although they might be weeping now, they will move themselves out and take on the same form of the branch that you cut out. Cats like watching their cat TV, their bird feeders. Yes, keeping junipers small is interesting, and there are lots of good pictures of pruning junipers in our pruning webinars. Some of the pruning webinars are on our free webinars page, and some you need to be a webinar subscriber to go back to them. If you're a webinar subscriber from this year, you can see all 190 of our webinars. You have access to the whole library. And where is the pruning? They're pruning junipers in Troy, Michigan. And when you register, when you give us an email or call us and give us a phone number, we will give you the address. We don't put people's addresses in our website. Our address is there, our phone number is there, but we're not going to do that to other people. Okay, let's see, what else did I miss here? Someone's got their hydrangeas being eaten by deer. Yes, deer like them. Not much we can do about that. Not much we can do about what the deer like to eat. Okay. Sorry. Okay, Bernie, I think I have your address, but if you send me I don't go back through the chat necessarily. Send me an email or a text so that I've got something that I can check and make sure and send you back the address from that way. Kenzie and her sister scooping things out of the pond. It's just such fun to watch kids.
Janet, may I interrupt for just a sec?
Sure,
It's
you can.
Therese.
Therese, yeah.
I just wanted to say, you were mentioning that we can't do much about the deer eating, hydrangeas and other things. But I had a friend who had one of those sprinklers that was motion sensor.
Those work. They work. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have to move them, but because like when the deer walk up, it's that.
Yeah.
And then the water kind of scares them, but you do have to move it occasionally because they learn.
They get used to it. Yes, we use the Scarecrow sprinkler was the brand that we used in clients' gardens, and of course we can't use it in the winter because you have to leave the water turned on. But not only did they work for the deer, but they worked for me. I would come in and I'd walk in and I'd forget that the sprinkler was there, and I'd hear that noise and go, I'm gonna get hit with the sprinkler. We used to get hit more. But we didn't have to move them around. It takes a little fussing around with them because you set the sensitivity. You don't want it to go off when a bird flies through. You want it to go off when a deer comes in. But they do work. Scarecrow sprinklers. You hook your hose up to them and leave it turned on just barely. There's just enough water and pressure in the hose behind it for it to squirt back and forth a couple of times and scare the deer off. So do the repellents work, but they have to be renewed all the time. And it can start getting expensive.
Do you mind spelling the name of that sprinkler that you use?
Scarecrow sprinkler. All one word, Scarecrow. And they
Thank you.
had little decals that you could put on the side of the sprinkler itself with big eyes on it. I'm not sure that helped, but that's where the Scarecrow came from. Junipers and butterfly bushes, they don't eat. Bernie says that's true. They don't eat those. They don't eat barberry. They don't eat amorpha. I was telling people about amorpha. That's a native plant. Amorpha fruticosa. It has kind of grayish green leaves, and right now it has purplish spikes on it. It's not as big and showy as hydrangea, but it's a good color to have in the garden. Bernie's deer are even eating daffodils. I'm assuming that a bunch of deer each ate a little bit of a daffodil. They don't make a regular habit of that, but deer will eat even food that's not good for them if they are starving. The DNR people have told me that when they have deer that they find dead, and if they do a necropsy to see what it died from, they will often find pine and spruce in the deer's belly that died of starvation because they were desperate, so they were eating things that they can't even really eat. Had several things from people, from Ruth and from Sonia, about flower mites. The look they cause is odd, and so the questions keep going. So just to recap on the flower mites, which are most noticeable on the cone flowers, the flowers with the big cones. You'll get deformities. It's hard to tell, but there's a raised spot in here where the seed chambers that should be forming as they are on the outside edge here are becoming distorted in the wrong size and shape. And that's from mites feeding inside the flower cone and irritating the plant, just the way a grain of sand irritates an oyster and the oyster forms a pearl. And it can get, so you might see just little bits of it. As long as the rest of the plant does not show any symptoms of problems, especially stems turning black and dying back, if you see that symptom and this, take the plant out, get rid of it. It probably has aster yellows. But if you're only seeing the distortion on the cones, then the important thing to do is to deadhead that and take those pieces that you cut off out of the garden so that you don't have more mites next year. You don't want it to build up, because then you're going to get a lot of mite damage. And the more mite damage there is, the less chance that the flower is going to bloom and give you any color at all. So if you look here, you're looking at extreme mite damage. Look, they've formed little satellite flowers off the side. There's so much distortion. Kind of cool to look at. And that's worse on this plant in Sonia's garden than some. So there might be a genetic predisposition to mites on some plants, but I'm not seeing any of the dead, dying stems, weak growth. I'm seeing only mite damage, so just deadhead that and get it out of the garden. Aren't they weird though? Okay, questions. Grape hyacinths, the deer eat. Yeah, they eat the foliage in the fall, that's for sure. The turkey into the garden. People who feed birds find problems with, now the turkeys come in. Our friends feed corn to the deer and the turkeys come to eat it. I think feeding them is one good way to bring them in, but I don't know what else will bring them in. And those people who feed birds like we do don't really want to have the turkeys if we can help it, because they're quite aggressive and they'll scare off other birds. They'll chase them off. Our friend Deb Hall likes to feed the turkeys, and
No, this turkey in particular is injured, so she's not much of a threat to anything. If anything, she's probably waiting to be taken by a hawk or something.
yeah, but whereas I can't tell you what'll necessarily bring turkeys in other than feeding them, whatever would bring in one turkey would bring in more turkeys. And
Well, she goes to like the dead trees and eats the insects and stuff.
Yep, they're scavengers, that's for sure.
If she ate my insects, I'd be happy.
Yep, and they do like hostas, that's true. Walking around the neighborhood, Ruth's been entertaining. Steve and I have been quite entertained with Ruth's pictures about walking around the neighborhood. She's curious, she's observant, and telling us things that are going on. And it occurs to us that more people should do that and do what we do in our neighborhood garden group. Go walk into other people's yards. Not let yourself in, but walk by on the street and take a look at what's going on. Talk to people, maybe get to look in. Because there's so much happening that we can use. So many ideas out there for what we can grow to look good. This cute down little fountain by your pond here. And this, as far as I can tell, this is a weed. I'll show you this weed later. And yet, it doesn't look bad. So that's like me standing in my mailbox trying to decide, should I spend my time out at this garden or should I work on that one? If it looks to me like your casual passer won't notice it, I'm not going to worry too much. Ruth sent this picture. She said, look, this hydrangea is eating this Japanese maple. I said, yep, that's a candidate to put eyes on, like the eyes on the topiaries that we put on. Just go and cut out make a little bouquet of marigolds. They keep their color for quite a time. Put them in. Then you've got Miss Pac-Man eating your Japanese maple. And Ruth noticed this tree, which she's identified, and I have not looked real closely. It's an oak of some kind, but she thinks it might be a swamp point oak. And she said, look, where are its roots? Trees are amazing this way. This one is straight into the ground, so this isn't the original depth of the tree. It's been built up around it, and these pavers are not ancient as the tree is. I would say that with the size of the trunk on this tree, it's probably 80 to 100 years old. And we weren't using these kind of pavers 80 to 100 years ago, so these were put in afterwards. But the roots are on some trees, and if it's a swamp white oak, they tend to be more tolerant of being buried. Swamp, just think of a swamp being inundated and things falling and dying and peat building up. Swamp plants often are tolerant of soil level changing around them. And this one, because it's in the middle of an area that the water's going to run down this pitching away, the extra soil around the bark is probably not going to rot it as quickly as it would rot, but might still last decades, but it could last hundreds of years. But I don't think it's going to last that long. If you look, can you see the dieback on it? It's definitely suffering some damage somewhere. We've been watching a 400-year-old bur oak die back. It managed to make it through the first paving around it and the first digging around it, but the next digging around it when they widened the street didn't work. But there are trees like this in New York City. When my sister lived in New York City, I used to just walk around amazed in the Tribeca district with ginkgos with trunks this big around growing apparently out of the concrete. We should have Scott Pittman talk to you. Scott Pittman owned Garden Central in Berkeley, Michigan for a number of years, but he has moved back out to the East Coast. He came to Michigan. They moved to be close to his wife's relatives and let the kids go to school with kids over here. And now they've moved back. But he worked first at nurseries that worked in New York City and Manhattan, Long Island. And he said every time that they would do construction on a street and rip up the street and the sidewalk, he and the guys on the crew would go and look to see what was going on underneath, because those roots are going out along, and sometimes they go out along the curb line. He tells me where the pavement meets the curb, there would be a place where the root had gotten itself in early on, and sometimes that root would go 2 blocks down and was just soaking up the water that rolled off of the sidewalk, especially, he said, where the doorman from the apartment buildings would come out and hose down the walk every morning. So they're amazing creatures, what they can live on. Also said, Ruth, I'm not familiar with this orange flower. I told her, I said, I think it's wallflower, the orange one here. I said, I'm not used to seeing the seed pod on it, because wallflower is one of those things like pansies that grows best in the cool weather, does it? But when I looked it up, I went, oh, no, this is wallflower. I think I can be forgiven for calling it wallflower, because there's very few plants that have that color and that kind of look. But it's not. It's called firecracker flower or marmalade plant. Perfect. And it's a Cassandra. And I should have known it was a Cassandra from this function here. But look at this name, because Cassandra infidubili formis. And what that means is infidubile. An infidubulum is a term for a funnel-shaped or cone-shaped cavity or structure organ. See the cone-shaped organ? Even with the scales on it. What a name. How can people hang that kind of name? Infidubulum, infidubuliformis, means it looks like an infidubulum. Craziness. Steve went walking while we were getting the dogs packed up to come here, and this is at the brewery that Sonia's husband Cam owns in, it's the Royal City Brewery. And a couple of years ago, they bought the building next door so that they could get a patio. And this is the patio set up. And I think it's working pretty well. Sonia does most of the planting out here for them. This was before they opened up in the morning. They've put up lattice to shield from the street that goes by Victoria Street right back here. And been planting vines that could grow from year to year, just be green on the lattice work. And something that just separated from the blank wall of the building. Pretty stuff, isn't it? And these are the ideas that you get from different places. For those who asked, and some people asked, so what's up with Sonia and the house they're building next door? Here's where it is now. Now it's extended out into the yard this way. Okay, what questions are there? Okay, Judith has got zinnias in pots. And the bunnies are not eating them, but they dry out so fast they need watering every day. and still wilt some in between waterings? Is there a way that I can reserve some of the water that now drains through them? Not really. The water needs to be in place where their roots are. And that is the problem with keeping things in pots, that eventually there's more root in the pot than there is soil mix, and you have to water more frequently. And drip irrigation is the way to go for that. If you were to set them in a pot of water, the roots that reach the water would rot because they also need air around their roots. What can you do? What can you do?
Janet, would soil moist crystals help in the initial planting?
If you put them in the initial planting, they might help a little bit because they hold more water per volume, per mass than the soil does. What else could you do? You know, you might be able to set the pot onto a tray full of the soil moist crystals, and fill the soil moist crystals with water, so that then there is space between the soil moist crystals and the water filled things that the roots could grow through the holes of the pot into. That might work. And it might also work that there now be a little more humidity around the pot itself. But you need to get some water. Soil moist is one brand name. There are WaterZorb is another name, but they're polymers that absorb water. And then you could keep more water available to the roots, but in a form that had air space between them so that the roots wouldn't rot. Okay, let's see what else we got. Thanks, Teresa. It's a great idea. I can't maybe. People come into my garden all the time. Yeah, I kind of like having people in the garden, but it is nice to know that they're coming into the garden. I hate looking out my kitchen window, standing there in my bathrobe, and see somebody walking past. A lot of mealybugs this year, Luann. Mealybug, if it is the mealybug that we most often see on houseplants, they are not living through the winter in a Michigan garden. They are going to get killed over the winter. They're coming in with plants, so there may have been some plants that you brought in from a nursery, a flat of, let's see what gets most mealybug, lantana. I have to think which ones get the mealybugs the worst, but may have had a suppressed population of mealybug when you bought them. They looked okay, but when you brought them in, because you didn't continue to do whatever the greenhouse manager was doing to suppress the mealybugs, they exploded into the garden. So that might be what's going on. I have a lilac that's 20 feet across and it needs some thinning. Well, that is going to work best. Our advice to you would work best if we had a lilac to actually look at, because you do have to take branches out, and there's a decision about which branches to take out based on where they're placed, how thick they are, whether they have damage on them. If you want to travel down to Akron, Ohio, we can do that. I'm not sure we're going to schedule any more of those. Telephone trees.
Well, I will get to you about that because it's a beautiful thing when it's blooming. It's just full of it, and it's just I just know I need to dig in there and trim out some stuff, just keep it going.
Yeah, and let it grow, let it rejuvenate, which is just rejuvenation pruning for a lilac. I see that you're also looking at elms that are dying. A lot of the elms that survived, or people say they're still growing, even though so many elms, billions of elms in the country died from the elm blight that went through in the 60s and 70s. A lot of the elms that survived because there were not elms nearby for the beetles to transmit the blight fungus from the dying elms to the new elms. But those beetles and the fungus are still existing in the country, and we've seen big elms that lasted for 30 years after the rest of their elms died suddenly die back from elm blight. We haven't gotten rid of it, and if they're not treated with a fungicide, it's...
Well, a few more treated, and they said the roots connect, and the ones in that patch would last, and they have lasted another 2-3 years, but I think their time's up. The trouble is when they snap, they're going to be in my bedroom with me. Hopefully while I'm not sleeping.
Yeah, it is dangerous to have trees that are dying back, but there's nothing that can be done for that.
No, it's on consumer land too. It's their trees, so.
Gretchen is looking for ideas for a vine in the shade. Virginia creeper. Kiwi vine will grow in the shade. It doesn't bloom very well in the shade, but we've got it growing in the shade and we're happy with it. Euonymus, all of the evergreen euonymus. They are sold as ground covers, but they're wonderful vines. You just have to keep trimming off the lower parts so that they grow up. Anybody else got any ideas? What else other vines grow in the shade? What you want them for, I'm assuming
Poison ivy.
foliage. Yeah, poison ivy grows there pretty well. And there are some there are some native vines like cat's claw, but they have thorns on them, and I don't like to tell anybody to plant those. Moonseed. The chocolate vine will grow in the shade, but you don't really want to grow a chocolate vine because it sets seed all over the place. I guess I have to think about that. Other things for growing in the shade.
Do hydrangea vines need sun?
To bloom well, they do. They will grow in the shade, but they'll usually in the shade, when you're growing a climbing hydrangea in the shade, they will spread out on the ground rather than growing up a tree. Let's
How
move
about the
on.
native clematis?
Yes. If you want flowers, that's Clematis virginiana would be the native one, at least native in Michigan. It will grow out to the sun and bloom in the sun. It won't bloom for you, but yes, it will grow in the shade, but it'll do everything it can to go out into the sun. New weeds. I just want to point out a couple of things that are going on here. I found these. I said, you look like pigweed, but you're not the same as pigweed. You're shorter and bushier. Leaves are more congested, and it's called white pigweed or stiff tumbleweed. The pigweed that we grow mostly is red root pig. Well, we don't grow it on purpose, but it grows as a weed for us. It's called red root pigweed. But this has showed up, and for the most part, in my yard, showed up near the bird feeders. So I said, oh, okay, this probably came in as contaminant seed. It was seed in the bird seed, because they when they harvest that stuff, they can't guarantee that it's 100% seed. Even if you buy grass seed, you'll see that it says on the label what percent of contaminant seed is in there. But if you find this guy, it's stiff tumbleweed. It's edible. Bunnies would like it. Purple amaranth is another of the pigweed type plants, and this one showed up. I said, well, now you're another one. You're not the usual amaranth that I see. This one's called Amaranthus dubius, and I have not quite figured out whether it's dubious or whether it's retroflexus. There's two different kinds of it. But when I first started pulling it, it has, see the red root? And red root pigweed is what I'm used to seeing around here, called red root because of this. But I'm thinking that we're bringing in more seeds with more birdseed. This one showed up in our yard this year. I said, well, now, I've seen something like you before, but I don't know what you are. Are you a good guy? Turns out to be white vervain. See the little tiny flowers on it? If you look at them closely enough, you'll notice them. You'll see the resemblance to verbenas, because it is a verbena. And this is verbena verticifolia. Verticifolia meaning that the leaves grow in little whorls around the stem. But if you look at the native hoary vervain, which grows in our yard too, you can see the similarity in the arrangement of the flowers and the type of leaf. It's different, and it's purple. And this one we let grow. It followed us here. It doesn't really belong in our dry, not irrigated garden. It belonged in our wetter area before. But the seed must have been on our shoes and our tools, and it came up here, and we let it grow seeds here by the downspout. It blooms later than other things do and is good for the pollinators, so we let it grow. I'm not sure I'm going to let this one grow, because since it's new to me just this year, I don't know how crazy it's going to be, whether it's going to spread all over the place. Its name gives it away with the virginica in its name. That makes it from the southeast continent, part of the continent. But even the leaves are similar but not the same. See that the edges are not cut the same, and the veination is not quite the same. And for those people who say, how come all of these things like insects and diseases attack my good plants and the weeds grow fine. This is that vervain, the white vervain, white verbena, and this is powdery mildew. They get on the plants too, we just don't notice it as much. White vervain with powdery mildew. Another one that showed up, and I just showed to my garden neighbors here, I said, oh, that's false nettle. No, it's Acalypha virginica, it's 3-seed mercury, and it looks a lot like Plumeria, but I should have noticed right away that it is alternate branched. So you leaf on this side, break, leaf on the other side, where Plumeria is opposite, where there's a leaf on either side. These are, for the most part, annuals, so they won't spread into colonies, but all of those seeds, that's a lot of seeds to be seeding in your garden with. I don't think we want to let the new stuff come out there. We like to have the animals in the yard. Rabbits and groundhogs moved in this year. We haven't had rabbits for several years, probably because of coyote and foxes, but groundhog came back. And fine, we let them eat the plants, but this particular groundhog moved into the yard we have fenced off around our deck, a dog pen, and moved in under the juniper where the dogs like to dig. I don't think it's a good idea for you to live under there. So we've been working on trapping him. There's an apple in there now. I haven't been successful with the apple. All we've been trapping so far are squirrels, which I go and let out and reset the trap. So I'm going for cantaloupe next time, because cantaloupe, a slice of cantaloupe in there has worked for us before. Yep, they like our yard. Water, plants to eat, you name it. Now, some weeds are not new, they just were there. This is stinging nettle. Stinging nettle apparently was being suppressed underneath the forsythia at my brother-in-law's yard, and when he pulled out the forsythia, stinging nettle, which is not an annual, it's a perennial and a running root, has popped up and is, I would say that it's a good 7 feet tall at this point. It does sting. You hit your bare skin, you know you've run into stinging nettle. I'd like to tell him to keep it there, because I did grow it on purpose at the Detroit Zoo for the red admiral butterfly. This is the red admiral. Red admiral hosts on Plumeria and a couple of other plants, but it needs a perennial to really do well, because they move in early in the year and it needs something up and growing to lay its eggs on for the caterpillars to live on. So we tried to grow it for it, but we weren't able to. I wish there was something else, because they are a beautiful butterfly, fairly large, not as big as a monarch. They're also very flighty. They're very, if you try to look at them close, you try to take a picture of them, they're going to fold up their wings and dart off to someplace else, keep their wings folded and pretend to be bark on a tree. I think it's fascinating that these butterflies, these creatures, have different personalities. Teresa's pointing out that purslane is a very edible weed, delicious and very healthful. I was pulling purslane out of a demonstration garden we had at Oakland Community College when we were teaching classes there, and one of my students, Jethro Eli, had come here from Taiwan, and he pointed that out to me. He said, "My mother would slap your hand for throwing that plant away. That's great. It's a great salad plant. Very nutritious to eat and easy to eat. And in fact, its name, the weed purslane, is Portulaca oleracea, and oleracea means of the field." Carol's pointing out that Clematis virginiana tolerates heavy shade, and it does. It grows in the shade, but it grabs hold of things and goes out and blooms in the sun. It's not going to bloom in the shade. I've never seen it bloom in the shade. The first time I ever met Clematis virginiana, which has also got some common names that include hobble, because it roots along the ground and you can trip on it because it's rooted here, and it's between here and here, the stem is rooted in 2 places. When I first met it, it was in the Upper Peninsula. I was taking my waders off. Steve and I had been wading in the stream and fishing, and I looked and I said, "Oh, what is that tree over there that's blooming?" Well, it wasn't the tree that was blooming in August. It was the clematis had climbed up the tree back in the shade, climbed out the branches, and was blooming out there. It's kind of the way they deal with things. Deer eating watermelons. Yeah, if it's edible for us, it's always definitely edible for deer. upland stinging nettle Ruth has is planted as a pot herb to eat. Yeah, I haven't heard people eating stinging nettle, all of the nettles. In fact, there's some saying in the old world, certainly in England, about to harvest the nettle, grasp it quickly. Don't brush your hand against it. But so they were eating the nettle flowers. Probably your non-native one that you're talking about. Pilea is in the nettle family, but is it perennial, Ruth? Is it up in the early spring? That's what we're looking for, are more things that are up in the early spring, so that when those first red admirals emerge from their overwintering chrysalis, there's something for them to live on. Yep, Teresa's cooking stinging nettle and making the sting go away. I love it, you guys. This is great. I think that might be the end of the things that I have for you here. My grandkids up north. Trent playing field hockey. And yeah, so, oh my gosh, it's 20 minutes after 8. I'm very sorry. This is where Stephen is off watching this guy practice hockey and helping with it. Ruth says she thinks that the red admirals migrate here in April. They are out early, and that's the thing. They come out of the chrysalis and move to the spaces where they're going to spend the summer, which can be further south of us that they come from, but they're out early, and we need the things that are perennial for them to do well. Brenda Sattler, her books written under Brenda's edict are excellent butterfly gardening books. She grows bromelaria and a couple of things in pots and brings them out early in order to have things for the red animals to live on. Teresa's helping you wouldn't notice the time. Thank you. Okay, so next Free for All is next week, August 28th. And the garden, our A to Z book club met this week. The next time we meet is September 21st. If you're interested in joining us, you don't have to read the book. You can just come with us. We were talking about sprouts, maybe equal time with books this last time. But the book that we're reading is Garden Spells by Sarah Addison. It's a novel, and it's lighter weight than some of the things that we've been reading recently. Have a good weekend, you guys, and I will talk to you. Maybe I'll see you in Troy pruning those junipers. Just send me an email or text or something that I can keep track of who I'm supposed to be keeping in touch with in case there's weather changes. Talk to you later.